All right, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Glad y'all can join me here. You'll notice I have something slightly different, a beautiful pair of headphones. And that's so I can hear all the amazing sound effects and other special effects that I've programmed into our stream for y'all. Um, I was just jamming out to that intro music. Anyway, we're not here to talk about my headphones. We're here to talk about the ACA-900, or Atlassian Certified Associate 900, which is Jira Software. This will be the fourth out of 5 sessions, so if you missed the first few, that's totally okay. They are recorded on the channel. And the first 3 cover topics like basic concepts around Agile and Jira and who might use this tool. We talked a bit about navigating Jira. We spoke a bit about working with work items. And then this time around, we're going to talk about things like workflows, boards, and the life cycle of a work item. So we're going to talk about just what happens to these things as we use them. As usual, we'll start off by talking about having a couple of slides just to talk about concepts and ideas to make sure we're all oriented. And then we'll jump into Jira Cloud Premium. I don't think anything I talk about today will not be in any flavor of Jira, but I'll do my best to call things out. Excuse me, the biggest single thing that might be missing would be something like Atlassian Intelligence, but I don't think we'll actually touch on that. And while I'm struggling to fix my little tiny circle head, it'll look a bit silly today, and that's completely okay. So we're going to jump into our slides, talk a little bit about Jira, and then we're going to jump in and actually get to use Jira. So here we go. As you can see, my little circle is smushed a bit. I also Bandit Fist. I like to pronounce it JQuil. JQL is Jira Query Language. So if you hear me say JQuil, that is what I'm referring to. In the same way that SQL or Structured Query Language is SQL. There's also ACL, which is Asset Query Language. I'll talk about that one in different trainings. Victoria, Valerie, Emily, good to see you. Glad you all could make it. Quick reminder about who I am if you haven't been in one of these before. My name is Rob. I've been in IT my entire career, starting out as the help desk person, and I've used some flavor of ticketing system ever since then for the past 20 plus years. They started out as homegrown, I think FileMaker Pro was the first one at the university I worked at, but started using Jira about 10 years ago, and I started using it as essentially as a customer to report bugs in our system. So I didn't use it the way that we will be talking about it. I used it more from the standpoint. Emily, there was an entire episode of what was it? How I Met Your Mother that talked about this exact thing, where you can make a catchphrase happen, and eventually it'll come back to you, and then that's when you've really made it. So I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to run my own path, and I'm going to be my best self by pronouncing it JQuil. There is a jquill.com in case anyone is interested. So I also do a lot of live learnings. I do the live learnings because I have noticed in my own life, there are a lot of tools and a lot of things that I am expected to know how to use that there's no training on. There's no university class about how to use Jira properly, for example. And that makes it frustrating for folks because once you join the workforce and once you start using these tools, you're just expected to know how to use Jira or how to use Confluence or anything else. Of course it counts, Emily. Kari, Kaithra, welcome. Glad you could make it. So I do these live learnings to help other folks, who like past Rob, who learned how to do this by doing, to do our jobs better and to be less frustrated. I also like earning certifications. I don't have a lot of spare time between family and work and everything. So these live learnings help me put time in for me to learn these things. Now, YouTube is great, but I can't see and hear you. I can't hear Emily rolling her eyes when she realizes it's my website. So please use the chat. If you're comfortable, drop questions in there. Please interact with other people. Please share information. Morning, Sarah. You'll see me ask questions as a way to just figure out what you all know and what you're interested in, but also feel free to put your questions or comments or concerns in there as well. I get a lot of great ideas on other content, and I have a lot of great connections, and it's really great to see, it's really great to see others interact with each other. Many times in the chat, other experts will chime in and help you out. And that means I also get to learn. So it's also a little bit selfish. I want to learn from other people in here. And of course, please like and subscribe. That helps the channel out, but also lets me know what you want to learn. We are nearing the end of our ACA-900. Next week, we will have one that will just be a review wrap-up, and then we're going to start a new ACA. And I'll have a survey coming up where I need your help to figure out what the next ACA is. Today, we're going to talk about the issue lifecycle. You will hear this noise. Whoops! When I say that word that I'm not supposed to say, and I stupidly left it in the slide, and I stupidly read it out loud. This word issue, did it again. Doink. Right there. They're not called work items. I have an entire slide reminding me about this. So we'll talk about work item life cycles, as well as workflows, and then boards. So this is a way to manage and track where our work items are or our tickets are in the process. Fernando, welcome. You must have come in at a very interesting point. Sarah, thank you, my friend. Emily, right there. That was unprompted. You didn't hear me say anything. I didn't send them any message. There we go. It is Jake Will. First, a question, though. Why are you interested in this course or in this training? And our why is an important thing to ask ourselves. And there are many whys. There doesn't have to be one reason. We all have our own. But it's important for us to know what it is, especially when we want to do something like a certification exam, because these cost money. This one is $100, and they cost time. We have to study for them. We have to go take them. So if we understand why we want to do it, that will help drive us. That will give us the motivation. That'll make it easier to get up a bit earlier and read our notes. I am interested in these things because I need to expand my skills. The way I learned Jira, it was by doing. And this means I have a lot of gaps in knowledge. There are things I don't know about Jira because I've never had to use them. For example, I'm studying for another exam, and I learned that you can translate the customer-facing parts of Jira Service Management. Didn't know that. Now I do, and that helps. Sarah took a basic course, wants to see if you'll learn more. I can't guarantee you will, Sarah, but what I can offer is, my perspective on it. And that's actually a good point. When we think about learning and when we think about building skills, the more perspective we get, the more people we can talk to, the more sources we can get information from, the stronger we get. Because I will use Jira a certain way, and Bandit Fist will use it a different way, and Kythra will use it a different way. And by talking to all these people, we get little bits of their knowledge and we get stronger. And this is especially true to your point. If you haven't studied it in a while, things change. Terms change. That word I'm not going to say out loud is now a work item. The navigation bar has moved. There will be differences when you go back to the system if you aren't familiar with it. Kari wants to prove to yourself that you know your stuff. Love that. That's a reason that I hadn't considered, honestly, at least when I usually talk about this. So thank you for sharing that, Kari. Kythra, learning with others is fun. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I did this. It's boring for me to sit by myself. But another big reason is validation. We can take a certification like the ACA-900 and go to our boss and say, hey, look, I know what I'm talking about, and I can prove it. And that certification can also do things like open doors. Some jobs require certain certifications, and without them, they won't consider you. So having them can validate your skills internally, like Kari is suggesting, but also externally to other people. But there's many other reasons. So as long as you know what yours is, that will be very helpful. It might just be you want to learn for fun. Or maybe you want to hang out on YouTube with this Rob guy. I don't know about that one, but you get the idea. So today we're talking about issue life cycles, workflows, and it's right there on the screen. You can tell how these slides are a little bit old. Sorry, this is 12% of the exam. So this is, if you are up against a wall and you have to determine what am I going to study, I would pick working with issues, understanding how to manipulate fields, understanding how drop-downs work or what the priority field does, is 44% of your exam. So if you can nail working with issues and nail basic concepts and get 100%, that kind of means like you pass. Oh, they're too loud? Thank you. How's this? Whoops. Oh, that still sounds too loud. Okay, I'll go back to the old one. Thank you for telling me. I'm also trying to evolve how I do these live streams, and I thought I had a solution, and apparently I do not have a solution. So I will correct that. Thank you, Emily. And I'll get rid of that button so I won't be tempted to push it. And this whole exam is about proficiency in using essential features. So this is not about being an admin. This is not about knowing how advanced permission schemes work. This is about you are someone working in Jira trying to get your job done. How do you do that? What do you need to know? Now, I've mentioned that this has changed. This word I'm trying not to say. Bandit Fist, we've spent years saying issues and developers calling it that, and now it's work items. It's not going to be easy to get into the vernacular. I completely agree. And this is where, with my team, I might still call it that first word. And you'll hear me say it all the time because for the past 10, 15 years, that's what I've called them. That said, when we go into documentation, it's going to be called something different. So when we look things up, when we need help, we need to use work items. And that's not something we can change. That's something that our friends at Atlassian decided. They think it's better. And so we're kind of stuck. But we can all call them whatever we want. As long as your team knows what you mean, please use that other term. Okay, a question for the group. What's the most important part of a work items life cycle and why? And I said lifey cycle. Wow. Or lifey cycle, as my typo put. Now, when we consider work items, like many things, they have a start, a middle, and a finish. And bonus points if anyone knows what this meme is from. It's very old, and it's dating me for sure. But, all work items start when they're created. Or maybe you could even argue they start before then when we determine we have some work we need to do. We sit down with our team and our product owner, the person who represents the customer, has ideas, has put in a bunch of new work items, or maybe the customers have entered them, or maybe our team has identified non-functional work, improving database latency or something. And then we create that work item, and now it's in Jira. And then stuff happens to it. Then we do work on it. And that's the middle phase. That's the question mark, and that's the joke in here. But things happen. The work item gets moved around. It gets the status will be updated. Tickets will be added. There's comments. Maybe it's connected to other systems or integrated with other things. The most important part, yes. I like how Kai throws it, following along with the joke. I asked the question, what's the most important part of a work item's life cycle, just to see what people think is the most important aspect. I don't feel like there's any one part that's more important than any other. It has to be created, it has to be worked on, and it has to be completed somehow. And that bit in the middle is what a lot of folks focus on, is what do we do with it? Do we add comments to it? How do we update the fields? Anthony, you get a bonus point. I don't know what points are good for, but you have earned one. This is a very old South Park reference. And it's one that I think about quite a bit when I don't know what happens in the middle of something. But at the end of it, somehow that work item is completed. It enters a done state. And that could be, or it's a duplicate ticket. We don't need to touch it. That could be that it's been completed. That could be something else. Emily, my problem is I don't know what the non-vintage memes are. Like, I'm not up to speed on what memes are today. And actually, maybe that's where folks can help me out. We have a Discord server going to study for stuff like this. But I need some education, apparently, on memes. So if folks have good memes, drop into Discord and please share them. Kari's saying it's about more being able to more easily move through the flow. Yeah, so work has this flow. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But in the beginning, when something's created, almost anyone can make a work item. And it's a little bit dependent on permissions. For example, if you don't have a license to Jira, you can't make the work item. That said, if you can access Jira, you can create work items. But Emily, we have to make new classics. You made, you've made that Kermit and Tea with Evil Rob. Like, that could be a new classic, right? I could be big in the meme world. Or not, I don't know. Now, this adds the work item into Jira. And this is the start of it all. There are different ways for it to be added, though. It doesn't have to be a human. Kythra, I like that one. Okay. So if y'all have meme recommendations, put them in, jump into Discord, drop them in there, provide the original meme, and provide your update, just so we can see the icon has cheeseburger with the icon has Jira burger next to each other. I'll get it started with that South Park one after this chat. Um, Now, work items can also be created by systems, though. So many teams will have systems that monitor the health of their organization or do something, and that can trigger a work item. For example, if a server goes offline, that may automatically create a work item for your team to work on. Or maybe when someone is hired, a ticket automatically is added to your system to make sure that it can be actioned on. Now, this is a bit of a joke. We had creation, now we have workation. Work is where things happen. And like I was saying, fields get updated, statuses get changed. And for me, this is where tickets can get a bit messy because different people will be touching them at different points in time. For the lens of the ACA-900, maybe my product owner has reprioritized it several times and its rank in the board has changed. And maybe maybe the customer comes in and realizes, oops, I forgot a part of this story, and they change the description on us. And then maybe the engineering manager who pulls it into the sprint does something like change the priority or adds additional information or adds links or removes things. And so the work part can be where a lot of things are updated and a lot of churn happens. So it can be challenging for the team to get a ticket and then look at it the next day and realize things have changed. So we'll take a look at the history on the ticket just so you can see how you can track that. But this is what most people think of when they think of Jira. It's you're operating, you're doing work, and then things change on the ticket that update in the system. And to follow the theme of the Asian, we've got the closation, the close, and this indicates the work is complete. Now, this will change the status of that work item, and we'll talk about statuses in a moment. And you'll notice that there's three colors. The green ones are done. It doesn't matter what it's called. That means the work is completed and no further action is necessary. When it enters a state like this, other things can happen. It might disappear from a board. So the way your board is set up, it might not show done or closed items. Or something else could happen. It could trigger other events in your system based on automations, based on something called a post function that update the work item or move it around. Now, it can also optionally be unclosed. Depending on how your system is set up, you might be able to move a work item from done back into in progress. But sometimes you can't. So depending on what happens when the ticket is closed, other actions can occur in the system. But it's dependent on how your organization happens to have set up its copy of Jira. Okay, another question for the group. Why are they called workflows? Because they make your work flow. Sorry, had to do that. Workflows are a part of Jira, and this is one where we don't have to know too much about them from the standpoint of being a user of a developer, but we do have to be familiar with what they are and why they're important. So a more serious question is, how familiar are you with workflows? Valerie, nothing more irritating when a ticket is closed and the work isn't done. Yes. I'm dealing with this right now where people will not respond. I work with Jira Service Management, so more of a help desk. And someone like Valerie might put in a ticket asking for help, and I ask clarifying questions, I'm missing information, and they don't give it to me. And then I close the ticket after a week of no responses, and then they get very upset. And so that's one example of, hey, it's closed and the customer's irritated. Another thing that can happen is maybe your developer closes a ticket and you go in and realize, hey, there's still a bug in the code or there was something that was missed. So just because the work item is closed doesn't mean that the work is truly done. We're reliant on the humans involved to make sure that it's been done. Kyther's more familiar than you ever thought you would be. Requests to modify workflows. I'm not familiar with that. Tell me more, please. Workflows are the series of statuses a work item moves through. Now, what we're seeing here is one of the simplest possible workflows. And you can see here we've got these gray blobs, green blobs, and a blue blob. And then they all have an arrow saying all. Now, if I look at this, this tells me every status can move into every other status. That's what the all means. The important thing to remember, though, is a status is where the work is in a workflow. It is not other things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the workflow will also differ based on work item type. For example, you may have a different workflow for epics than you do for stories, than you do for tasks. This allows your team to manage different flavors of work differently. These workflows can also be shared across different projects. So if you're working in Project JQuil and you move over to Project JQuil 2 The Reckoning, there might be similar workflows or there might be different workflows. Sarah, the way you're phrasing that suggests they are no longer awful and they are not confusing. So I'll call that a win. When I first started using Jira, I didn't know workflows existed. I was just told click this button and then change the status. And then I got very confused when I couldn't move something from in progress back into backlog, for example. Oh, gotcha, Kythra. I thought there was a button I could push as an end user that would let me send in a request. But it sounds like you're saying you, as the admin, are getting people ask you for help, which makes a little bit more sense. Okay. Yes, if you happen to be a Jira admin, you will be very familiar with workflows. A big part of an admin's role is to set them up. However, as someone just using it, as someone who wants to earn the ACA-900, you just have to know they exist and what they're for. Now, one thing to remember about the statuses, the phases of a workflow, is they represent where a work item is in a process. It is very easy to conflate them with other things, though. Statuses are not the name of the team working on the item. Statuses are not why something was closed. They're not why it's stuck. They're not a priority. They are where something is in a workflow. And this goes back to our why. Why are we working this way? And does your team understand every step of its process? And this is where you'll see a lot of groups fail. I've seen developers get very frustrated that there's too many statuses. And that's because the team hasn't sat down to truly understand what do we need. So if you're working in Jira and you're going like, hey, why do I have 15 statuses? Go talk to your team and ask why. I've seen groups that have 25 statuses in their workflow, and that's simply too many. That to me suggests that they could think through a better way to work. So keep in mind that the status should ideally be where something is in a process, not another piece of information. That other piece of information can be a different field on the work item. Now here we have one of the simplest workflows, or simplest set of statuses. It's an idea, you've decided you're going to do it, you're doing it, and you've done it. I've heard stories of groups that went from 30 statuses down to 3 because they were able to use the system differently, and that made everyone happier. Less to manage, less to think about. So now they're less awful and less confusing. That's good to hear, Sarah. They didn't specify anything initially that it would change more than one project. Yes. So as I mentioned, workflows and statuses can be shared between projects. Now, it's a bit beyond the scope of this training to explain how and why that works, but you will notice as you're working in Jira, as you go between projects, the same set of statuses, the same workflows showing up. And this is good and bad. It's good because it means as a developer, as you move between projects, you understand how things work. It's bad because if you change any one of them, you change all of them, which I think is what Sarah's talking about. Well, Kythra, if you just memorize everything that's possible to know about Jira, it's very obvious, right? He says, tongue in cheek. I'll be honest and transparent. Building and developing workflows is a huge weakness of mine because I have not been in the role that my friend Kythra here has been in to be the actual admin. I've had to learn it by practicing in demo environments, and it can be very challenging for the admin to figure these things out. So as you're working in Jira and you identify things to improve, go find and talk to your admin, but also have a little bit of empathy with them because it is on the back end, it's a complex system that lets us do a lot of different things. So we need to remember that the people maintaining it and setting it up are learning and they're human just like us. And it's super easy to forget that. So we have statuses in our workflow, and then we can move things between statuses. Now, these are called transitions. So when I move a work item from backlog to in progress, I am transitioning it. Now, every transition has some kind of name. The name might default to the destination status. So I might just have a transition called in progress, or I might have a transition called promote to sprint. It depends on how my team has set it up. Now, there are some transitions that allow you to move to any status, and these are called global transitions, and that's the all that we saw earlier. That is the simplest way to do it. Many times, though, a team will restrict which status a work item can go to. So keep in mind, if you're on, say, the in-progress status, you might not be able to go backwards into backlog, or maybe you might not be able to go straight to done. You have to go from in-progress to code approval to, approved to done. It depends on your organization. And these transitions can include restrictions. You might not be able to transition something if you're a developer. You might have to have a manager do that. Or maybe there's an additional screen like we see here that prompts us for information. As we transition, the system says, hang on, I need to know a resolution. Why is this ticket being resolved? And I need you to link it to other issues. Or maybe I need you to update the priority or take some other action before the transition can occur. This boils back down to how we operate and why. And so what shows up in your environment will differ based on how your team operates. But keep in mind that when you transition something, a lot of other things happen under the hood. It can update fields, it can trigger integrations, it can prevent you from transitioning if something's missing. It can do a lot of other things. We kind of talked about these last week, but do you use boards in Jira? And I will drink some delicious coffee out of my Zelda mug. And I'll try and fix my talking head. There we go. Sarah, that's mostly all you use. I love that answer. Boards show up on this exam because they are a core part of how many Agile teams operate. So the ACA-900 is around Jira Software, which many software teams use, and they happen to use Agile project methodologies to do that. So when we're considering Jira, we need to also remember that there's going to be a lot of good stuff in here around boards. Now, this is a screenshot of one. We'll take a look at one live in a moment. But on the left side, we have this navigation menu, and this is the new nav. So this is the general Jira nav menu. It's going to be what lets us navigate through Jira. And then in the middle, we've got the board itself. Now, we've got at the bottom, this actually technically is in the backlog. I need to fix this. But these are all the things that don't fit into a swim lane. Now, what's happened here is we've organized this board, it looks like by a status, by expedite, or by a priority. So everything that falls into that category is in one swim lane, one row. We can change swim lanes, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the thing to look at here are these columns. I've got one called backlog, one called selected for development, one called in progress, and one called done. These columns are important because they will map to some status in your workflow. Now, it's possible for multiple statuses to exist in one column. So depending on how your board is set up, your in progress may have 3 different statuses you could select from. There might be, code. I got to make up statuses on the fly. Code being written, code being reviewed, and code pending final review or something. But on the board, you want that to just be called in progress or something else. So the names of the columns can differ from the status, and multiple statuses can be in here, but there always has to be at least one status per column. The individual cards represent individual work items, and you can have some editing here. You can click on these little heads to reassign them directly from here. Any issue with performance related to the number of statuses on a Jira server? Interesting. Bandit Fist is using a flavor of Jira called Data Center. And this differs from Cloud. Cloud is managed by Atlassian, so you don't have to worry about the server or, big patches, that kind of thing. Data Center gives companies more control. However, there can be a feature disparity depending on the version of Data Center, and your Data Center's performance can differ based on the hardware it's running on. So you have to manage that. It's on a computer somewhere. Bandit Fist, I don't know offhand. I can take a look at that, but in my mind, there's probably some number where you'll start to see slower performance because the more stuff that's running on the server, the slower it will get. So in general, more equals slower, but I don't know if there's a hard cutoff Like you can't have more than 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever. Kythra lives in a current sprint board. I hear it's sunny and nice there. That's good to hear. Current sprint boards are life. It's good to see these comments. Working in sprints for a while. Curious, Christina, if you can expand on that. What do you mean for a while? Typically, groups will work, just use Agile on an ongoing basis. So they'll do 52 sprint or 26 sprints a year, 26 2-week chunks. But that's why this course exists, is because many people, when they use Jira, only use the board. And that's perfect. They just have to manage their work. They have to know, what am I working on this sprint? Oh, I've got these things under backlog. I have to get them to done. That's all they should have to worry about. Now, I've mentioned these columns. I won't dig into this too much, but they have to have at least one status in them. That might be a subtle hint for the exam. And typically, this is someone's homepage. As we've seen in the chat, many people live and breathe in here, and this is where they're expected to be most of the day. And this screenshot needs to be updated, so I'm going to quickly skip past it. Now, you can transition things through the workflow by just clicking and dragging. So you don't even have to open the ticket to change the state of it. You can just drag it from backlog into selected for development. And this will update the underlying status. And now, if there's multiple statuses mapped to a column, you'll get a blue box that will let you pick which one. So you just be careful. If you drag over it and there's multiple statuses, you got to pick the correct one. Kythra's having a hard time using Jira without boards. You haven't used Jira Service Management, have you? And I joke because most of the time people in JSM live in queues, so a different way to visualize tickets. I tend to exist outside of boards, but I'm not usually the developer. I tend to be the Scrum Master, the Systems Manager, the admin. So I tend to exist in Jakewill. My friend Jakewill. See, it is a thing, Emily. Now, I've mentioned swim lanes a couple of times. This is a different way to group the board visually. And typically I do this by assignee. You'll notice the top, all the tickets here are for Robert Heen. And so this means when my team comes in, they just find their swim lane, their row, and they get to work. And this also makes reviews easy because you can collapse all of these and then just open up Rob. Okay, Rob, what's going on with your in progress? How can we help? Great, next person. Okay, Kythra, let's go to yours. Okay, Christina, let's go to yours. Bandit Fist, we'll take a look at yours as you go down the list. Now, if there's unassigned, they end up at the bottom. So typically in a sprint, you want all the work assigned. So this is another easy way to visually see what needs an owner. No worries, my friend. But again, that concept of a board is much more on the what we used to call Jira Software. I think we're just supposed to call Jira now. Jira side of the house. And this is the part of the program where I need your help. I mentioned that we only have a few sessions left, and by a few, I mean exactly one, for ACA-900. So my goal by the end of the weekend is to have selected a brand new ACA to study. I'm going to drop a link here that includes 4 questions. One question is, which professional level certification should we do next? The next is, which associate level should we do next? Then it's, how can we improve the study community? What will make it better for you all for learning? Because I want to make sure I'm doing stuff that you all find useful and interesting. I will keep making up ideas, but I want your feedback. I would love for you to let me know, what do you want to do? And then I also have a newsletter going. You can optionally opt into that. Oh, interesting. So you went from Kanban, which is one way to use the boards, which is about optimizing work in progress, so you don't have too many items just sitting around. And then you wanted to try Scrum. Oh, you've bounced back and forth. Interesting. And you've tried both the 2 and the 3-week sprints. Christina, what I really like about what you're describing is the entire mindset of Agile is to adapt and adjust how the team works. It's not just about the work, and you'll hear me say this quite a bit. It's also about improving the team. And so by experimenting and by trying different things with your team, you are helping them improve. So that's really, really neat to see. And this is our magical portal into Jira. Whoops, there we go. All right. Again, we are in Jira Cloud Premium. Kari has both Kanban and Scrum. Uh, just to confuse everyone, there is something called Scrumban, which is a combination of the two. I personally haven't used it, but it combines the workflow restrictions of Kanban with the time-bound iterations or sprints of Scrum. So that's something else you might see. Typically, and especially for ACA-900, we're going to be talking more about having Scrum, so the board. Then we'll be talking about having Kanban as the board, those two differences. But be aware that there are variations and gradations of each. And now I need to go find the projects I was working in. Here we go. And of course, my Zoom isn't going to work. It did this to me yesterday. Fine. Be that way. So here we have our board. And the first thing I'm going to do is just open up a ticket. And I'm going to pick this one at random. And here I have my work item. And quickly reviewing it, I can see, a summary, a description. I noticed it has subtasks. The important thing to know about subtasks is they have to have a parent. These subtasks cannot exist outside of their parent. They can, and we learned this last time, be moved into a different status than their parent. And you can see me here just dragging it, and it's going to move it to selected for development. This is relatively new. Before, the parent had to follow it. So this is something that it's good to see. I imagine, actually no, I'm going to stop. I'll have to go test that out. I'll put this back under its parent just so it's in one spot. But something for the exam is subtasks cannot have subtasks. There's only one layer. And typically groups we allow developers to build their own subtasks. I run my life in 1 week sprints. I run mine in about 15-minute sprints. I have to keep reassessing very quickly between kids and the house and the cats and everything. So I can see there are 2 subtasks, and I can see some fields on the right here. I like this joke about admin. Administrator. That's a good name. What I can do, though, to look at the workflow is click up on the status it's currently in, which is backlog, and then click on View Workflow. And this is the workflow for this particular work item type. Now, I mentioned that different work items will have different workflows. So we'll take a look at a different one in a moment. But this will visually tell me where it can move through its workflow. The all means every status can go to it. So this workflow is telling me every status can go to every other status. So this is this is almost the most simple workflow you could possibly have. We could tear out selected for development, and then we just have a backlog, a to-do state, an in-progress state, and a done state. Interesting. Justya, I hope I'm saying that right, uses sprints to define objectives we're supposed to meet, no matter which team, and then each team has a Kanban board. Oh, so an overarching sprint board helps track it. Oh, Kythra, sorry. The laugh is because I think that's awesome. I don't have the discipline to do what you can do. I just don't have that capability. So I think it's amazing you've been using Jira and Confluence so much to manage your personal stuff. It's something that I aspire to, and then I sit down and try, and 2 days later I've forgotten about it entirely. So I absolutely love that you found a way to use these tools for something not work related. Most people think of these tools as only helping us professionally, but as you and many other people have proven, the benefits of this tool can be felt in many places. You just have to be better than me and actually have the discipline to go do it. So here's our simplest workflow. I like to look at this anytime I go to a new project just to see what's possible, and also to help keep me from getting frustrated. For example, you might not be able to take selected for development tickets and move them straight into done. So you might see an arrow from selected development to in progress and then in progress to done. And that would tell you I can't move from selected for dev into done. Just not possible. And that can be frustrating. I've worked with teams who say, hey, I'm on the board and I can't move my ticket from backlog straight into done. And I'll take a look at the workflow and say, yeah, that's because there's middle steps you have to follow. I kind of do too, Emily. I'm curious. I've heard a lot about how Kyther's able to manage everything, and I'm super curious. Yeah. So that's the workflow. And again, you can access it from any work item under View Workflow, and everyone can see the workflow. Now, admins can change the workflow. So as a team member, if you're like, hey, I think this is wrong or needs to be changed, talk to your admin. You can change the status right from here as well. So if you're working on your work item and you're filling stuff in and you're saying, hey, code is complete or whatever, and you put a comment, you can move it to in progress and then whatever else has to happen. Now, this will update the board because the board is just a different way to view the ticket. So you can click and drag it, or you can do it from the work item. Now, within the board, I also have some settings. There's this little slider up in the top right for view settings, and this can help me out here. I might start by collapsing everything. And I mentioned before, I do this a lot when I've grouped things by assignee. Oops, let me collapse this again. Because when I do my sprint planning, I want to see all of Rob's tickets and just Rob's tickets and maybe the unassigned. And I go, hey, Rob, I've got a new ticket for you. I'm just going to click and drag it. Oh, I can't drag between swim lanes? That makes me sad. I'm going to click on the little head here and assign it to Rob. And that'll bump it right up into theirs. Okay, we've done all of Rob's planning. Hey, admin, we're going to take a look at what you have. And it's all right here. What I love about this Kythra is you've identified something you want to help improve, and then you had, again, the discipline and the resourcefulness to go do that thing. That mindset to me is really cool, and that transcends systems. You just so happen to be expressing it in Jira and or Confluence, but that approach to, hey, I've got a challenge and I want to find a solution is awesome. So I would go through this board and then just change people. So I take a look at admin. Oh, admin, actually, this one's in progress. Let's just fix that right now. And now we've moved it to in progress. Now you'll notice at the top of the board, I've got these little numbers. So this is telling me there's 2 work items in progress, 4 items in selected for development. I can't see them all because some of them are assigned to Rob or some of them are assigned to Alana. But it's keeping track of the total thing. Now under view settings, there's other things I can do. I can do things like show open issues in sidebar. And I like this one because when I click on it, I'll get the issue over here. I can see the board and I can see the work item. This is a personal preference though. Other people I work with prefer to have it open like this. For me, I like to see the overall picture, so I keep it that way. You can also go through and change the images that are shown. If I don't want to see assignee on the card or priority, it depends on what your needs are. But there is one little tiny thing you might notice, these little dots. These little dots tell you how long the work item was in a particular column. And this is an important reminder for us, especially in Kanban. It's like, how long is something sitting in progress? Is it truly in progress? Is it dragging? Do we have to address it? So we get some visual reminders here of how is our work doing that Jira just does out of the box. Start stand-up. Oh, that's a cool new feature. I love these live learnings too because I trip over brand new stuff that I've never seen before. Changed our workflow to 2-week sprints. Yes, 2 weeks is a very common interval for what Agile calls an iteration or a sprint. They tend to be between 1 and 4 weeks. Most groups happen to pick 2 because then you get 26 in a year. It's very easy to plan out that way. There are other things we can do on this board though. Up at the top, I can filter. So if I only want to see a particular epic, and again, an epic is a larger piece of work. It could represent a project. It could represent a major portion of work. But if I go look at the epics workflow, I'm going to see the same thing because it has the same workflow. Wow, that was not a good example. Workflows are tied to the work item type. So typically your epics will have a different workflow. So I'm going to go see and if I can find a different workflow very, very quickly. JQuil JSM, I need your help, please. Nope, not going to open. Here's an entirely different project. So I'm going to go to view this workflow. And here we can see an entirely different setup. This one doesn't allow every status to go to every status. The black dot is the ticket is created. And you'll notice, see if I can zoom in here. When I zoom in, you're going to see little tiny names. Oh, that's great. Sorry. Oh, Jira's being helpful and it's not zooming in the actual workflow. Well, I'm sorry, folks. If I mouse over the status, the transitions are the black lines, and I can see what they're called. So from to do, I have two transitions. I have an in progress and a details required. But to do can only go to in progress and awaiting information. I can't have a ticket go from to do to approved. And this can be a source of frustration because folks say, hey, I just need to get this thing approved. And I say, hang on, you've actually got to first go to in progress and then review and then approved. And this is where talk to your team to understand why things are done that way. If you're frustrated, because there can be a very good reason to force these stages or steps, or you might actually uncover something that, hey, we can just go change it. I'll take the filter off. I can also filter by type if I only want to look at my stories, for example. Oh, there's exactly one. Okay, fine. And I also have other quick filters. These are, I was going to say a quick way to find work items, but these will filter down the board based on something that your board manager has developed. So there are things we can do on the back end of the board to help teams, one of which is filters. So there are two out of the box, recently updated, what's been changed in the past, few days, and then what is assigned to me personally. You can also check this rocker, and they'll show up as buttons. I encourage my teams to do this so they can just see them the whole time. They can just open them up and they're ready to go. Now, you need to talk to your admin about adding or changing these. Usually as an end user, you don't have the ability to do that or manipulate these. It's intended more for someone who has appropriate permissions just to make them pop up. All right, got about 10 minutes, team. What questions do you all have about boards, workflows, or statuses? And while I'm drinking delicious coffee, I post on LinkedIn. I'm trying to do daily about Atlassian tips and tricks. So feel free to check me out there and just see what's going on, in addition to all the YouTube stuff I get involved with. All right, I'm going to pop open. Is this a good ticket to work on? No, I want something with more stuff. Come on, Rob. Make better demo stuff. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to talk a bit more about working with work items, and that's because it's essentially half of the exam. And so if you can nail work items, you're already about 2/3 of the way there to passing, to passing your exam if you want to take it. It's also where you're going to spend a ton of time working, shockingly manipulating your work items. You'll notice there's attachments. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with how they're displayed. They will be rendered depending on where they are. So if they're in the comments, they'll show up in a comment. If they're in the description, they show up there. The good news is they get pulled into this attachments section. And so right from here, I can do things like just see a list of attachments. And so depending on how your team works, you may have more or less things attached. Now, typically, the groups I work with will be using Confluence more for knowledge sharing. So I won't see attachments of like a PDF or a Word doc. Instead, I'll have seen them link a Confluence page or a whiteboard directly to the ticket. And this is something anyone can do. But I can make new knowledge directly in Confluence right from here. So I encourage my teams to do this. It keeps you in Jira. You have to have permissions in Confluence, but all I have to do is say new Confluence page. I'm going to give it some title. Fix slides ish. Didn't say it. I didn't say the word. I said ish. I can fill in whatever I need to. I can publish this page. And in a few clicks, I've added some more knowledge in. Now, this is very useful because it gets the ability to create knowledge as close to the work as possible. So I ask my dev teams, go in and do this, and then I will go through and update and correct formatting and whatever. But you'll notice it's now linked directly to the ticket. I can also just add other things. So you may end up opening up a work item and you'll already have information tied to it. So when you first open them up, double check and just see what's on them. There might be information linked. There might be other work items linked. Maybe there's a whole bunch of bugs tied to it that you should go look at to try and solve it. Hey, hang on. I got you. Ready, Emily? There you go. I hope others got that joke and appreciate it as much as I did. So when I open up an issue, I'm going to go check for linked information. And as I work on the issue, oh my gosh.
Whoops.
Sorry. That's what, 5 times so far today? I'm keeping track of the number of times I say that word just for giggles. And even right here, it's got the wrong word. That's why I said it. I'm going to blame the UI. As I work on work items, I will then link by clicking this little button or by up at the top, add linked issue. That's 6. Anytime, Emily. Glad I can support you. I will add in other things that are linked to it. Now, this is very helpful because then if someone else looks at it, they'll say, hey, I'm blocked by some other work item. And there's different relationships when you link a work item. It depends on your organization. Most places I've seen don't bother changing these. But this is powerful information to give to a developer because now they can understand why they can or cannot start or stop work. Other things we can do in here, there is time tracking in Jira. Personally, I have a love-hate relationship with this. I like the ability to track time against specific things. However, it's very clunky and a bit of a pain in the rear end. And so what I mean by that is you have to come in here and find time tracking, or there is somewhere work item actions, log work, queue. So to get here, all I did was close out the work item, hit Shift ? To open the keyboard shortcuts, and I'm looking under work item actions. So if I hit the Q button when I have that work item open, it's going to let me add work. Nope, let me try that again. There we go. So you can track time on the work item. I've asked teams to do this, and it feels like it's too many steps. There are add-ons that help with this, but for the purposes of the ACA-900, just know that you can track work in here. You can indicate how much time might be left on the work item, and you can add a description of that work. That said, practically, many teams I work with ignore that entirely, and they just put comments in about what happened. Updated the code, whatever. Now, every work item has comments by default at the bottom, but if you click on history, you'll see what has happened to the work item. I find this very useful when I inherit a ticket. I want to figure out what happened. And so this will keep track of every action taken and when it was taken. So we can see this work item is over a year old, which is kind of amazing that it hasn't been worked on yet. But up at the top, I can see, oh, look, Rob did 1 day of work. And he added a blocker and some other thing, added a wiki page, great, and then he moved it into the status. So the history records every action taken on the work item, and it's a great place to go if you're wondering, why did something happen, or how did it get into this particular state? And with that, I have to teleport back into Jira. Part of the ACA-900 is not just how to use Jira, it's about things like project management, and how do the skills and ideas surrounding project management help. This link will take you to a project management course I have that's just project management for non-project managers. So it covers all the basics of Agile and Waterfall. So I can recommend that if you're looking to learn more about project management. If you're already familiar with it, it might seem a bit basic because it's intended as an intro for someone who doesn't know anything about it. So please keep that in mind as you're considering this or any other course, like who it's meant for. And I'll drop this link down in the chat for you too. Nobody look. nothing happened. All right, folks, we have one more study session for ACA 900, and that is next Friday. So please attend. That's going to be a review. Please bring questions. Please think back about everything we've covered or take a look at the official documentation and ask yourself, hey, what else do I want to learn or what is confusing? I will have some placeholder questions or I'll have some that I make up that I'll pepper in there. But please bring your questions. And also, please let me know what certification we should do next. I hope to have these all scheduled by next Monday. So by the next time we chat for the 900, I'll have another series of about 5 sessions for the ACA fill in the blank. There's a lot of good options out there, and I don't have any particular slant on which one I want to personally do next. So please give me your feedback on that. I want to make sure these are useful for you. And if you have other ideas for things you want to learn, drop it in there or drop it in the chat as well. Of course, we've got our Discord server. I saw some folks joining in the middle here, but that's a great place to pop in. And the intention with that is to give us a spot to go to chat between sessions and a real-time place to interact and have that sense of a group and community beyond just YouTube or just the forums on Atlassian community, which is a great spot. In terms of the exam, if you're going to sit it, I highly recommend scheduling it. So go into Atlassian and I'll talk about how to do that next round. But pick a date, put it on the calendar, and give yourself that thing on the calendar you're going to have to go do. For me, that helps me get serious about studying. That helps me amp up and get ready for it instead of, oh, I'll just do it at some point. And if you want to take that exam, get hands-on and do work between our sessions. The 5 hours we have together could be enough to learn everything if you start from not knowing anything, but it's much more likely you'll need other sources of information or more practice different things to understand these concepts and ideas. So please make sure you're taking time to go study and brush up on your skills between sessions. Otherwise, I'm not seeing any questions come in. And I think I answered everything. I'll leave the chat open for a little bit, but I do want to thank you all for joining me. I've had a lot of fun with these study sessions. This will be the 3rd exam we've gone over, in addition to the professional series and the ACA 920 for Confluence. And I'm looking forward to seeing whatever the group chooses as the next ACA. It's a great opportunity for me to learn and have a lot of fun building out the slide decks and hopefully not deafening anyone with sound effects. So on that, thank you all so much for joining me. I have a lot of fun with these. I hope you enjoy them. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the 16th, which is next Friday, for our review session for this. So please come with your questions or ideas, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then.